When it comes to knowing whether you're hydrated, it's a lot more simple than it is to know if your pet is hydrated. But hydration is really important for them, for their health and their happiness.
Do you know how to tell if your cat or your dog is getting enough water in their diet? Or worst case, if they might be dehydrated? And if they are dehydrated, what should you do? How can you entice them to consume more water?
We wanted to start at the beginning. How much water do they even need? So we went to an expert. We asked Dr. Patrick Mahaney, who is a veterinarian out in LA and even does house calls. And we asked him what the baseline was. How much water do dogs and cats truly just need on a day-to-day basis? And here is what he said.
Well, cats and dogs have different water requirements. Cats generally have less of a requirement than dogs, in part due to their genetics, but then also sometimes related to their lifestyle. Cats tend to be more indoors, less active. Most dogs tend to be outdoors and more active, and so they're going to be burning off more water just by living their day-to-day lives. So probably, I'd say, like thinking about a 10-pound cat, a 10-pound cat would probably drink about 200 milliliters per day, so about a tenth of a liter, for example. While your average dog who's 10 pounds is probably going to drink more closer to about like 350 milliliters per day. So not a huge difference, but something that is notable. I mean, you definitely need to make sure that that dog's going to get more water into him on a day-to-day basis than the cat.
Milliliters. What even are milliliters? Here in America, I feel like we hardly ever use the metric system. We like our more unique units of measure, our cups and our ounces. Mm-hmm. So what is milliliters, Chloe?
Well, I poured it in here in this little metric to ounces measuring cup, and 350 milliliters, which was the 10-pound dog, is just about 12 ounces, just slightly under. So 12, it's like a cup and a half. But he said 200 for a cat. So let's pour out and get to 200 and see what it is for a cat. There we go. It is just about a little over 6 ounces. So I don't actually even think that that's that much water when you put it into ounces. And since dogs and cats are made up somewhere between 70 and 80% of water, it feels like getting those milliliters, those are important to get into their system. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely, especially since we're only about 60%, I think. Yeah. So the fact that cats and dogs are actually a higher percentage of water than we are, mm-hmm. we should really be making sure that they stay hydrated.
Absolutely. So I think an interesting thing to think about that we talked about in the beginning is how can you tell? So we love our pets a lot, but they don't talk to us. And so when we think about what are signs of dehydration so that we can be in the know and a little bit aware and ensure that they get enough water, Jessica, I know you've got a good story.
I do. As a pet parent, it's the worst feeling in the world to wake up and hear your dog or your cat retching and then throwing up and having to deal with that at 3 a.m. And it's even worse when that dog or cat does it again and again and again. And that's what happened. My dog Luna, she threw up constantly. She kept throwing up. So I panicked and I took her to the vet, and it turns out that she was severely dehydrated. I had missed a whole bunch of signs to tell me that. But luckily, it was remedied pretty quickly, and my vet was just able to kind of inject her with a hydration bubble, made her look a little bit like a hunchback, but it seeped into her body and let her absorb those fluids over the course of the next 24 hours. Mm-hmm. So on that note, what were the signs that I missed? And I was really wondering. So we went back to talk to Dr. Patrick Mahaney and asked him what are other common signs of dehydration that we should look out for.
Some of the signs to look for dehydration, and there are numerous, and sometimes there's some subjectivity to it. Number one, if your pet is acting lethargic, if you don't have as much fluid circulating around your body, your blood gets very thick, and it tends to be stored in your body for your more important organs like your brain, your heart, your lungs, your kidneys, and liver, and so your muscles are not going to get as much hydration, and you're going to probably just not move around that much and not seem as alert. But probably one of the more important ones that I think is looking at your pet's gums and assessing something called capillary refill time, or CRT. So if you were to lift up your dog's muzzle or cat's muzzle, you would see the gum tissue below, and ideally on an area that's pink. you would take your finger and you would press down on the tissue just for probably a second or two, enough to almost like a sponge squeeze out that water, and then release your finger and see how long it takes for the color to return to normal. Less than 2 seconds would be normal. More than 2 seconds or so starts to get concerning. Definitely more than 3 seconds, very concerning and indicative of dehydration. You also can think about something called skin turgor too. The thicker your skin is, or the more dehydrated you are, the more likely, if you pull up on the skin, generally say like the skin between your pet's shoulder blades and their scruff, if the skin tends to stick and they have that residual ridge, there's more potential they can be dehydrated, but that can also happen due to a variety of other reasons too. So I feel like that's a little bit more subjective. I think the best markers for dehydration are lethargy and also increased capillary refill time.
Those are all things we should all be looking out for. But notice Dr. Patrick Mahaney did not say anything about your dog's nose. It is a common misconception that that is a way to definitively tell whether your dog is hydrated or not. It doesn't mean it's not necessarily a sign. Let's say your dog's nose is constantly wet and all of a sudden you see that it's not. That's something to look for, but it doesn't only point to dehydration. It could be a lot of different things. My little dog, Onyx, he has a dry nose naturally, and it's something I was concerned about. So I asked my local vet about it, and she actually said it wasn't indicative of anything specific for him. Noses are part of the skin. Your dog could have a skin condition. It could be sunburned. There's a lot of different reasons your dog's nose could be dry. So doesn't mean you should completely ignore it, especially if it's abnormal, but it doesn't necessarily directly mean dehydration. Definitely ask your vet if you notice your wet's dog nose all of a sudden being dry, or your cat's for that matter, because it's not a perfect indicator and it's not necessarily what you should use as an indicator, but it could indicate something. So know that.
And I think that's true with a lot of things with our pets. They're all individual. They all have differences. So keep an eye on what changes and what stays the same.
Yep.
So now that we've chatted about the signs of dehydration in our cats and our dogs, we should also talk about how to avoid getting there, how we can keep them hydrated every day. And Chloe, I know you have a pretty interesting method to keep your dogs hydrated.
Indeed, I do, and I happened upon it accidentally. My dogs like frozen vegetables, like broccoli and beans. And so one day when I was boiling broccoli for myself, I realized, oh, there's like remnants of the broccoli left in the water. Maybe my dogs will enjoy that. They didn't just enjoy it, they loved it and like lapped it up like it was the best thing on earth. So now that's a part of I don't necessarily do it every day, but it's a part of our like weekly, maybe twice a week, I make broccoli water. I eat the broccoli. I might give them a couple pieces, but then I give them the broccoli water and they love it. So I'll even use that sometimes to put on their kibble so that it soaks it up as a way to just get them to eat it all in one sitting. But broccoli water is my clue, my hint. And I know there's many other ways. So we went back to Dr. Patrick Mahaney and said, what else can we do to ensure that our dogs and cats are getting the water that they need? And here is what he said.
Owners can get their pets to drink more water in a variety of ways. And I always like to think about, let's eat our water instead of drink our water all the time, because sometimes water may not be available or a clean source may not be available. So if your dog or cat is eating a diet that's moist, then they're going to be getting more of their hydration needs met just by eating their daily meals. That could be one or multiple meals a day, depending on the style of feeding that you do and also your pet's interest. So this could be a fresh, moist, home-prepared diet or a commercially available diet that's fresh and moist. Maybe a dehydrated food that you add water to, like a powder or a medallion, or maybe even foods that are canned. Canned foods by default are going to have more moisture than dry foods. A lot of the canned foods that are commercially available, the first ingredient is water. So they're going to be eating their water more instead of drinking their water. But we also could add water to dry food. We could give them interesting things to drink each day, like low sodium broths, definitely lacking any onions, garlic, chives, possibly some coconut water, maybe some water from the vegetables we cook, like some broccoli water, unflavored Pedialyte, other great options. And maybe if your pet doesn't want to drink the water or whatever you're trying to get into them, you could make little cubes that you put in the freezer and they can sit there and lick it for a long time. That's a way that kind of engages their and behaviorally stimulates them. So there's so many ways that we could think about and use to get more water into your pets, but definitely I like to think about eating the water more so than just drinking it.
Let's eat our water. I really like that because I think the idea of finding ways to have moisture in food is a really helpful way to keep pets hydrated. So that's a takeaway I got, and I hope you take that away too. And one thing that he didn't really talk about, which I think is worth giving a few tips on, is traveling. Like when you leave the house, how do you make sure you've got the water that you need? And Jessica, I know you do that a lot. So what are your tips?
Absolutely. I think the number one tip is making sure that you have enough water for both you and your pets and whoever else you're traveling with. I know when my husband and we go on road trips, we generally throw a few large jugs of water in the car because they're great. You can consume them. You can pour them into a dog bowl. If your radiator breaks down, maybe that'll be helpful. I think that's tip number one is make sure you have enough. Then my second tip is to freeze some of that water, especially if you're going on a hike or a road trip during the summer when it's super hot out, because that water will melt over the course of the day or whole trip. And then you'll have some nice, clean, refreshing, cold water after you've been hiking all day or driving all day. If you're like me, I much prefer cold water to just room temperature or even hot water that's been sitting in my backpack or my car for a whole day. And a lot of dogs and cats are the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things also he didn't say related specifically to cats is about fountains, because I know cats really like moving water. So having a couple of fountains that have moving water can help for cats in your home and keeping them hydrated.
Absolutely. And there are some outdoor fountains too. So if you have dogs in there, spend some time outdoors. It's a great way too to keep those leaves and bugs from not just sitting stagnant in a bowl outside.
Good point. We hope that you learned what you needed to know so that you can keep your pet hydrated. You know how much water they need, tips to do it, and signs to look for so that we can all live hydrated, happy, healthy lives.
Leave a comment below with something that you learned during this video about pet hydration. Or if you have a pet hydration tip that we didn't discuss, let us know. And if you love learning about the pets and animals that you love through short videos just like this one, be sure to subscribe to our channel.